Yes.
The Dallas Cowboys.
Ooh.
Jerry Jones.
Ooh.
So I just pulled up a list. I was curious. I'm like, yeah, it feels like the Cowboys have been kind of quiet since we last podcasted.
Okay.
I know they didn't really make much of a splash on day one of free agency. And then, day two, we recorded on day two, and they hadn't really done much, if anything, by then. Like, it kind of feels like for all this we're all in talk in Dallas. Yeah. So here's the list of what they've done as of last night here. So I don't think they've done anything at 5 o'clock in the morning. They've re-signed a few of their own. They brought back a few of their own. A couple cornerbacks. Their long snapper they brought back. Trent Sieg.
That was a big sign.
Bring that long snapper back. They released, so Leighton Vander Esch, did he retire, by the way? He might have retired.
Yeah, that's crazy.
So he's got Michael Gallup got
released.
He did, yeah. Good career for Leighton Vander Esch.
Yeah.
By my account here, they've signed one free agent, and he's your guy, actually. Linebacker Eric Kendricks reuniting with Mike Zimmer's defense.
Not surprising.
That's it, man. They converted $4 or $5 million of a Dak Prescott roster bonus to a signing bonus to just get a little breathing room with the cap, but they lost their franchise left tackle. They lost Tony Pollard in free agency. I don't know, man. It's hard to look at Dallas right now and say, yep, this is a team that's taking a huge step forward. Like they're going to break through in 2024.
Right.
I think, in fact, here's my hot take. Cowboys fans, put your earmuffs on, okay? I think it's more likely the Cowboys miss the playoffs entirely in 2024 than make a run to the Super Bowl.
Ooh.
That's my hot take, Booney. I don't think you can lose Tyron Smith. I don't think you can lose Tony Pollard. And by the way, like a month ago, I feel like half the team was out on social media. You had brothers and cousins and different like family members chirping about Dak Prescott on social media. It just feels like weird vibes in Dallas right now.
Very weird vibes. And I agree with you 100%. But I'm not going to say losing Tyron Smith is going to be the be all and end all. And because I will say this, the tackle market's obviously not really big right now because it's such a tackle heavy draft. This is such a good class of tackles coming out that a lot of people are starting to think like, hey, I'm going to have to pay this guy north of 10 to be here, or I'm going to go draft a rookie who's going to be phenomenal for us. Like when you talk about some of these players in this year's draft that are going to coming into this league, they're awesome. Joe, Olu, Felice, Troy Fatnu, Roger Rosengard. Like there's a lot of dudes, Armarius Mims. There is a lot of them, and that's why you're not seeing any of these dudes getting picked up. And that's what I think Dallas is looking at is they're going, hey, we're going to have to draft one, which is fine because they're not bad when it comes to drafting O-linemen. They've actually been really good for a long time. Like they know how to put those pieces together. But I agree. Maybe losing Tony Pollard and not going out and doing anything else is kind of like but it's funny because when you look at what everybody else in that division is doing, like Saquon went to Philly, right? Like they were like, hey, we're going to bolster this up even more. We're going to double down on our run game, which to me was like, holy shit, these guys are for real. Mm-hmm. You put that team on paper right now and you're like, damn, dude, that's a tough team. They were a really good team before. Now you've added a premier beast of a back. But then you talk about what Washington did, and they went out and spent the farm because they're like, we need to retool this entire team. We need to redo this entire thing. And then all of a sudden you talk about the Giants trading for Brian Burns, trying to make these big moves. And then you look at Dallas and you're like, hey, you guys awake? It's live, free agency happened 48 hours. Like I remember everybody for the first 2 days was like, are they asleep in Dallas? But then again, you stop and you go, maybe they think they have what they have. Maybe they're looking at this going, we don't need to spend. We were a playoff team last year. Yeah, we lose Tyron. We'll draft one. That's fine. Yeah, we lose Tony. We could draft another one. I think that in their mind, Jerry Jones is like, we're good. We have what we need. We got to the playoffs. We just had some unfortunate luck. Quarterback played like shit. He's probably not really thinking that because he loves Dak, but that's the truth. And then all of a sudden you talk about going into the season, and that's when people are like, we probably should have retooled. We probably should have went out and got a little bit more than we did. But
I feel like the Bills are kind of this way. I mean, you can speak to this with those San Francisco teams from 10 years ago. It just kind of feels like when you get an organization like the Cowboys have won 12 games exactly 3 years in a row, 2 division titles. They've been one of the highest scoring offenses one of the best point differentials. Like if you just look at their regular seasons the last 3 years, dominant.
Oh yeah.
And then they're just early bounce, right? The Buffalo Bills, kind of the same way where, man, on paper, regular season, largely dominant. They've been a little further, I feel like, and then they keep running into Patrick Mahomes. That's the other big
Which is
difference.
so hard, right?
The Cowboys they're not even getting to the Patrick Mahomes stage yet. They're not even getting to the Super Bowl. And those Niners teams, man, like you guys had 13 wins, 11, 12, but you were getting to conference championship, Super Bowl. But when you don't break through and win it after 2, 3, 4 years of being at the top of the division, top of the conference record wise, it just feels like, I don't know if it's resentment, if it's you're pounding your head against that glass ceiling, and it doesn't always break through for teams. And that's where I'm at with the Cowboys. It feels like everyone's sort of exhausted by the failures of the wild card round and the divisional round the last 3 years. What's going to be the factor that if Dak Prescott were Patrick Mahomes, I would say don't worry about it. It doesn't. You can lose a left tackle. You can lose. Kansas City lost Tyreek Hill. They say goodbye to pieces all the time. But they have Patrick Mahomes. I don't think Dak's on that level. Right. I think he's a good quarterback. I don't think he's going to make up for your deficiency. So what is it like when you're banging your head against the ceiling 3-4 years in a row, and you haven't broken through for a Super Bowl? What does it feel like in that locker room, I guess?
I think frustration. And a lot of it is that's when guys, I feel like this is where it goes sideways the most, is when you are at that point and you're like beating your head on this wall and you're like, maybe it's me. Maybe I need to give more. Maybe I need to do more. And then the minute you start pulling yourself out of position, something bad goes wrong. And you're like, it's just frustrating. When the truth is, it really just comes down to execution. We're just not executing well. And we're not coming out here and all 11 of us aren't winning at the rep. We're not coming out here and playing as a unit. Like, there's so many reasons, but guys, in that moment, and it's really hard to tell somebody that it's something else when you're almost dead set on like, I know what this is. And they're like, no, stupid. It's just the execution. Like, we're doing fine. We just need to complete a couple more passes, a couple more third downs, something simple. It's not like this massive problem that we're having. It's just like the flow of the game or whatever it is. But then you just take it for something else, and you're like, I'm almost positive it's this, and you're like fighting each other now, and then it's resentment, like you said, because you're like, well, if they would have just held them that one time, or if the punt returner doesn't drop the ball, and you're like, you get really mad. You know what I'm saying? Like, and it's a terrible thing because it's your best friend that you're talking about, and you get really mad at him, and it's not right. But that's the competition kicking in, and that's your competitive spirit. Like, I'll do anything to win. It's crazy, man. It is crazy. And that's why I agree with you. I think that this team needed a little bit of an overhaul, and instead they were like, we're good. We're going to be fine.
We're good minus a couple pieces. I will say that there's a pretty big addition that we haven't touched on. I am curious about Mike Zimmer back in the game as a defensive coordinator. As a head coach, we've outlined, you've told some stories, Jay's told some stories. There were some issues toward the end of his Vikings run for sure, but like as a defensive coordinator, now he's been out of the game for 3 years.
Oh yeah.
And the game moves pretty fast, but I am curious to see Mike with Micah Parsons, with that secondary, ball hawking secondary. If he's still at the top of his game as a coordinator and he's throwing exotic looks, I don't know if he can just come back with the same double A gap.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I know what
from
he's
5 years ago, but I'm curious.
No, I mean, he's going to be fine. And that's the one thing is like when you talk about a guy like that, and it's funny because people are like, he has been out of the game. It's like, yeah, but it's not like he hasn't been watching. And it's not like for years he wasn't scheming out people and destroying offenses. Like, it's not hard for him to walk in and go, this is what they do. And that's the one thing that people don't know is like when defense look at us, they're basically like, how are they sliding their protection and what responsibilities do the running backs have? Where we're thinking the exact opposite. Who are their known blitzers and how do they like to bring it? Right? Like all these things become important. So it's not hard to scheme up an offense, but at the same time, you talk about a guy like Mike Zimmer having the ability to have a Micah Parsons. He's always had such great edge rushers. So you have two great edge rushers, right? What the hell else does Mike Zim need? I mean, you got two guys out there causing problems. And that's why if you're going to go look at Mike, you start going back to look at his film when he had Daniil and Ev, and you start to say, all right, what's he going to bring? You already know he's going to have those two on the same side. He's going to be splitting them at times. He's going to have Micah walking around. There's probably going to be times he's going to have both of them in the A gaps. We just call that big Cali. So you put the linebackers out at defensive end, and you bring the defensive ends into the A gaps. And so then it becomes like a condensed look. But at times it throws you off because when you look up and you see two edge rushers standing up in the A gaps, you're like, what the hell is this? And then you see two linebackers outside, and all of a sudden you forget the rules stay the same. We're just kind of remiking things around. But in that moment for like 5 seconds, you're in a very big panic. And you're like, does everybody know what's going on? Like just simple things like that. Mike's really good at that. He's good at being like, hey, I want you to pick your hand up and move out 6 inches. Because all of a sudden then it's like a whole different look. And you're like, wait a minute. What is this? And you're like, oh, I'm in this. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, that's why he's so good. I don't worry about guys like that. They know how to just press on the pressure points and be like, yeah, you guys suck.
Yeah, dude,
it's rough.
I will say they also, speaking of sack leaders for the Cowboys, Dorrance Armstrong signed with the Commanders, and he was second on the team in sacks. I think he was second in pressures. So 26 years old.
Dan Quinn was like, hey, bud, you want to come with me and be the guy now? But that's why, like, Washington excites me. Dan Quinn, he's an excitable coach. I played against
number 2 pick. They're going to find a Jaden Daniels or a Drake May at the top of that draft too.
Oh, for sure, dude. It's going to be exciting.